Hello everyone and welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video. And just before we jump into things, I just want to say a massive thank you for 2,000 subscribers. Obviously, do really appreciate all of you that are subscribed. It does really mean a lot and I obviously really appreciate it. But in today's video, there's something slightly different to my usual Grand Arena rounds that I do tend to upload, in that it's still going to be Grand Arena focused, in that I'm going to be discussing my top 5 free-to-play Omicrons for Grand Arena for the early to mid game players, and it will hopefully apply to some late game players as well. Without further ado, if you do enjoy it, obviously a like and comment is always much appreciated, and let's just jump straight into it. So the first character I would like to talk about is Zam Wessel's Omicron on a unique ability Shapeshifter. She is tended to be used with bounty hunters, as that's where you get the most benefit from her Omicron, in that she increases the survivability of the whole team and the damage output and the speed. She basically does like a whole big like Chupio sort of thing with her unique ability in Grand Arena. So rather than her getting the 20% boost that you would normally get, she gets 60% instead in Grand Arenas, and then obviously 5% speed for each other bounty hunter ally. So that's an extra 20% speed in 5v5 and 10% in 3v3. And then she then shares 20% of her overall, well, her current, I should say, offense, max health, max pension and speed until the first time she is defeated. And you might be wondering whether she's actually quite squishy as an attacker. If you are planning on going for LV, you are going to need her at Relic 7. And obviously at Relic 7, you can get her stats up pretty high. Mine is currently around the 100k combined mark. So and obviously, but that's not bearing in mind, that's not with any Datacrons or any of the actual stat boost from the Omicron itself. And with 338 speed, she's going to be very fast. So a lot of the time, you will just outspeed the team you're using them against. And that will obviously mean that she will take less damage anyway, because you should just blitz through the team that you're wherever you're attacking. Unless you're fighting an LV, because that is where she can be quite useful against Lord Vader with Fennec. Her use is definitely better in 5v5. Like I mentioned, obviously against LV with Fennec, or just to boost up a general bounty hunter in team in general, whether you want to be using Bosk on defense or some sort of Django team on offense or anything like that, where you just need that extra stat boost. Obviously Zam will be very well plugged in there to obviously with the Omicron to boost them all up. And you can actually farm her shards up pretty easily in the guild store for 10 shards a pop. So you can actually get her up to 330 shards, obviously 7-star very quickly. And that does mean that she is a very good early investment in my opinion for a lot of early to mid game players. Next up on my list is First Order TIE Pilot. Obviously, you will be getting the First Order faction up and relict if you are going for Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. And not a lot of people would have done that already because of previous free-to-play guides where SLKR, well, going for SLKR first was the ideal way to boost your account up. So First Order TIE Pilot Omicron makes a very good use of the leftover First Order faction that you would have farmed up for SLKR anyway in Grand Arena on his Keen Eye unique ability, which grants a bunch of extra stats, which is really nice, all based around advantage and things. So everyone will get 50% max health, so that's pretty massive. Extra crit damage and 100 speed when they have advantage. Then when they don't have advantage, extra 100% tenacity, obviously to stop things like buff immunity from applying. So that means that you can actually keep getting that advantage, is the whole reason why that's there. And then you do have some health and protection recovery when you lose advantage, which obviously means you've crit someone. So there is some banners there as well. And then you also have gaining bonus turn meter, they gain advantage as well. And then obviously foresight as well to stop you getting hit. So very good counter against things like Afra in 3v3 and 5v5. So my ideal comp that I like to use my First Order TIE Pilot with is with Hux and a Sith Trooper in 3v3. And then it's the same in 5v5, but you add in Phasma and the original Kylo Ren, because both Phasma and Kylo Ren have turn meter boosting abilities. So you can actually keep that advantage going and obviously hopefully gun down the whole team before they start taking their turns. So like I mentioned, you will be getting First Order TIE Pilot with your SLKR farm, and you will have him at Relic 3, which I think is enough. The only reason I have mine at Relic 5, which you can't actually see because it's covering, my camera is covering it. The only reason I did that is to boost up for Datacrons. Obviously, if you do have a very nice high offense or crit damage or something like that, you can use with your Hux lead First Order TIE Pilot Omicron. Obviously, it does mean a lot of difference for the damage output you can do. And you can actually farm First Order TIE Pilot shards from a dark side node. And he is accelerated as well, but luckily no super quick farm with like Cantina. I think he is quite a slow 16 energy node hard farm, unfortunately. So next up on my list is Darth Treya. Her unique ability does have the Omicron, which is Lord of Betrayal, which is obviously for Sith allies. You might be thinking, obviously, Treya is a raid character. She's not really accessible for early game players, but because of the raid changes that we've had recently, you can actually get her a lot quicker than you used to be able to, in the fact that you can actually obtain her shards from the guild store. And if you do happen to find a guild that is running heroic Sith raid, you get an extra 10 shards per raid in that, so you can actually farm her up a lot quicker than you used to be able to. So getting her to 7-star isn't actually that bad as it used to be. But this is a very good Omicron, both useful in 5v5 and 3v3. And I'll quickly show you what the Omicron actually does, in that it is very similar to Zam's, that she increases the overall stats of everyone's crit damage, max health and offense. And then when they suffer a debuff, they gain 10% bonus protection, which obviously means a lot more survivability as well. And then if that wasn't enough, if your team has debuffs, Treya will dispel them, and all allies will gain 5% crit damage, health steal, max health, and offense, stacking max to 100% until the end of the counter. Until the end of the encounter, is what I was going to say. And obviously, if Darth Talon is there, which she usually is in at 5v5, if she suffers a debuff or is critically hit, Treya will gain 12% offense stacking for 2 turns. So bear in mind, with all the other stats that are above, Treya can hit like an absolute truck in some cases. And this is the really good thing that used to be really good against Lord Vader and things before they nerfed the Omicron, in that when Nihilus, Darkseid and Talon's health fall below 90%, their cooldowns reset. So you used to be able to get an instant annihilate off pretty much most of the time with Nihilus, which made him very good against the Darkseid Galactic Legends. And that is why there is that clause in there now, because obviously she was a very good counter initially against Lord Vader, and then they nerfed it. So if you're not fighting a Darkseid Galactic Legend, she is very good on 5v5 and 3v3. The only thing that does mean in 3s is that she can be soloed by the likes of like C and things, because obviously that C is a Darkseid Galactic Legend that just negates the whole Omicron and just makes the team really easy. But in 3, she's probably mostly used on offense. In 5s, you can use her on offense, or you do have the choice of defense because she's a very good defense team as well. Her kit is obviously very good outside of the Omicron, lots of control, but the only negative thing to this is that there isn't really too great banners wise. As long as you can just keep going and get out in front of the enemy team, you can maintain your banners. But there is obviously a risk that against certain fights like Reaver and things, where you can just lose banners or just part of your team just because of the cleansing. But very good team, beats a lot of S tier teams in Grand Arena for sure. Now next up we have Wumper, of course. You probably will have guessed what first place is, but I have put Wumper second, just because it is an offense only Omicron. But it obviously is very useful in the fact that you only need to have him at relics. So I do happen to have my relic 7. That's probably what I would recommend actually getting your Wumper up to if you want to be using this efficiently, because a lot of teams that can be Wumpered do tend to pack a punch now, and a low relic Wumper, obviously depending on date cons and things, will tend to die off sometimes, because a lot of people are just stopping Wumper or just setting non-Wumperable teams on defense. So obviously for any of you that don't know what the ability is, Wumper gains 100% tenacity, so obviously stop him getting dazed and things, which is what stops him. And then if you have no active allies at the beginning, which you always will do with Wumper, you gain extra stats as well, doubled. Well, you get an extra 150% stats for your defense, max health, max protection, offense, which is huge. And obviously means that he has that solo viability. And obviously the higher you bump up those relic levels, the more increases you get for that. So it does make him an absolute menace at the higher relic levels. And then there's the thing where obviously he gets attacked, he inflicts damage over time for three turns on attack an enemy, which can't be evaded or resisted, which is really nice. And the cooldown of his roar, which stacks his offense, is reduced by 1, and he gains stacking tenacity throughout the encounter. But obviously not to spoil what's going into my number 1 ranked Omicron, but there's obviously been a massive argument for months and months about whether Wumper or Savage is the better Grand Arena Omicron. I just think Wumper is second on the list, just because he is only useful on offense. And obviously a lot of people, especially in Kyber 1 at my level, they are setting teams on defense where you can't use Wumper, and Wumper is basically only there for cleanup opportunities. But I imagine early to mid game, where you're climbing up the ranks in Grand Arena, Wumper will be a huge asset to your attacking squads to use obviously on offense against your opponents. The only downside to Wumper is that you are going to have to slow farm him, in that you will only be able to get him from the guild store for the guild 2 tokens, which are quite useful for other gear rather than for shards. So the main way you would be getting Wumper tokens is from the guild event store, but obviously that is going to be quite slow because that is obviously depending on your income from territory battles. So make sure you get yourself in a good guild to make sure you get enough get one as possible, so that you can farm Wumper as quickly as possible, because you are going to need him at Relic 3, I believe, to unlock Gen Knight Luke. And obviously that means he will be a good addition for both getting Gen Knight Luke and for your Grand Arenas as well. So that does mean that for the number 1 slot, we do have SWGOH Oppress. He is absolutely fantastic in a 3v3 and 5v5 in either offense or defense. You have so much flexibility with him, plug and play opportunities, whether you want to use him in a Starkler team, for example, or you want to set him with Treya, who I mentioned with earlier. He is just an absolute pain to kill in certain scenarios, and his Omicron is on his unique ability, which in essence is very good and very frustrating to come up against. He gains a lot of bonuses anyway from his Zeta. So he gains defense up, health over time, offense up for 2 turns, and gains 30% turn meter whenever he takes damage. Bearing in mind that he will gain an extra 50% defense from the Omicron, max health and offense, and 30 speed. And at the start of the encounter, he gains 2 stacks of resilient defense. So it's basically a pre-taunt. And whenever he ends his turn, he gains another 2 stacks of resilient defense and 10% turn meter for each debuff on other Sith allies. So that is a huge amount of turns that he can get in. So you can just mod him really slow and really healthy, so you don't really need to worry too much about speed. Whenever he is critically hit, he gains 16% health steal and offense. You can actually see your SWGOH hit for like over 100k in certain scenarios, and all other allies gain 4% health steal and offense as well. So bear in mind, you can actually stack this with Treya's Omicron. You can actually have an absolute powerhouse of a team in 5v5, which is what I tend to do, in that I use Treya with SWGOH in 5s and have been putting them on defense a lot, because to be able to beat Treya and SWGOH on a defense, you need a Galactic Legends. And obviously you want to be drawing your Galactic Legends out with teams that don't have Galactic Legends on them. So this is a very good Omicron investment, especially if you want to be climbing. He does have a lot of solo opportunities as well. Not as much as Wumper does, obviously, of course, but can beat certain teams like CLS and things in 3s, CLS 2PO and C3PO, for example. A very good counter against that. And while he has resilient defense, obviously he gains 50% defense per stack, bearing in mind that I believe resilient defense can go up to 10, which it can. So that's a huge amount, 500% defense if he happens to have 10 stacks of resilient defense. He doesn't tend to have that many, but he's then inflicted with vulnerable, which means he can be crit. And when he's obviously crit from his Zeta, he then dispels all the debuffs that he has on himself. So really, really annoying character to beat. You do need a very good counter to beat him on defense, but he also does have a lot of offense viability as well. Just to quickly mention, as I forgot while I was editing, that SWGOH is a Grand Arena only character. You don't need him for anyone else. So if you do want to invest the resources into SWGOH, you're literally only going to be doing it for Grand Arena, because outside of that game mode, he is absolutely useless. But he is very easy to farm in that you can get his shards from the Squad Arena store. And obviously that is available from the get-go. So you can actually farm up your SWGOH very quickly. And it might actually help you if you're a really early game player to jump through the early Grand Arena ranks and obviously get more crystals in order to actually relic up other characters. So there is that to consider as well. So that is going to be my top 5 free-to-play Omicrons for early to mid-game players. I do have a couple of honorable mentions that I want to go over for the later part of the game, which is like mid to late game players, just because I just feel like it is worth mentioning for Grand Arenas going forward. So the first character I would like to talk about is Zori Bliss. Her Omicron is really amazing, obviously for both 5v5 and 3v3. If you really want to boost her Omicron ability up, you probably want to be applying roses as well to use with Finn. But for the most part, Zori's Omicron will just be enough, and you can just use Rose with that has Omicron on the team as well. But she does really well in 3v3 with both the Finn, so that's regular Finn and Resistance Hero Finn. And in 5v5, she can just blitz through teams where she just gets a lot of turn meter gain from all the exposure that she applies. with her unique Omicron, which is here. So in essence, this Omicron is essentially inflicting explosives, which can't be evaded or resisted when she starts with stealth. And obviously, if you're using her with Finn, which you will be gaining a lot of turn meter from all those explosives whenever like Finn throws his grenade or anything. It does really ramp up the team quite a bit, and you just get a turn meter train going. So the only reason I've put her as an honorable mention is because if you are going for Bray, you are going to be finding up obviously the whole of Resistance faction apart from Zori, because she is a new character, and it does really just make a good use of a leftover Resistance team where you will just probably just leave them on the bench, not use them at all. Obviously Finn, Poe, and those original characters that were in the game before Bray came along don't get used a lot if you don't have Zori. So if you want to make use of another team for both 3v3 and 5v5, Zori is definitely worth it, and she is available to farm on a hard no for 12 energy. She is obviously not accelerated yet, is the only unfortunate thing. And last but not least, for my honorable mentions, I wanted to talk about Searjunder. Her Omicron is absolutely fantastic. As I mentioned in my previous video, you all want to be working towards building up a Searjunder Unaligned Force user team for Grand Arena, no matter what your level is. Obviously, I know a lot of early to mid-game players won't have a lot of Unaligned Force users to work with because the requirements for this team is quite steep, hence why she is an honorable mention rather than in my list. But her team is absolutely fantastic on defense. It's up there with the Reavers and the Treya Savage teams in 5v5, and even in 3 she does really well as well. And obviously she is about to get amplified from Tara Malakos, who's coming to the game and is likely to be seen a lot with Searjunder on defense, and he has his own Grand Arena Omicrons as well. So this is probably going to be a Star Killer-esque team, but for defense, if that makes any sense at all. And her Omicron itself is actually on her lead ability. So Unaligned Force users are going to be gaining a massive amount of survivability with extra health and protection, and the fact they have a bit more control as well with not being able to be ability blocked or daze. You can still stun them though, which is quite nice. Makes things a bit easier if you can actually pull a stun off. But they gain 75% protection up at the beginning of the encounter, and then whenever they deal damage to an enemy, they gain stacking offense for 2 turns, which is really nice for Sokatana Fulcrum with her Whirlwind. No, is it Whirlwind? I can't remember her big leap ability is called. It can hit like 4 times or something. So that could be an 40% increase of offense for that one ability for Ahsoka, and she could deal massive damage with Searjunder. She's really one to look out for in that team. And the really good thing about this team as well is that you can just mod them really slow. You do ideally want to be modding them slow, because if you let the enemy take as many turns as possible before you start, Unaligned Force users gain an additional 10% crit chance, crit damage and offense stacking, which is what she gets from her Zeta anyway. So you get double the amount of that, which is huge. And then whenever an ally dispels a debuff, they recover 15% health protection and gain advantage for 2 turns. And then whenever an ally dispels a buff, they recover 50% health protection at the end of the turn. They gain Foresight for 2 turns. There's a lot of just like missing them, and obviously they do have a lot of health and protection recovery. It just can be a really annoying team to face. Gas can kill this team quite easily, but forcing Gas on a team like this where you only need 1 Omicron, I think is very worthwhile, because Gas is a very good offense team in Grand Arena. But that is going to be the end of my video. I do hope you've enjoyed this list. Obviously, let me know down in the comments whether you think I've left anyone out or whether you disagree with my list and think that someone else should have been included. But obviously, thank you very much for watching, and I shall catch you in the next one.